There is a moment, and most people can identify it if they think carefully, when they first noticed that a year had passed too quickly. Not rushed exactly, just gone. The summer that should have lasted forever was over before it felt like it had properly started. The birthday that seemed impossibly far away arrived, somehow, without warning. This is not a complaint. It is something stranger than a complaint, because everyone around you is reporting the same thing. Your parents reported it. Their parents reported it. People across every language and every era have written about it with the same particular mixture of bewilderment and low-grade dread. And we have an explanation. A clean, mathematical one. Each year you live is a smaller fraction of the total life you have accumulated. To a 5-year-old, a single year is 20% of everything they have ever known. To a 50-year-old, it is 2%. So of course it feels brief. The proportion shrank. The explanation is correct. It is also somehow entirely beside the point. Something about time's acceleration resists being solved by knowing why it happens. You can understand the mechanism perfectly, and then watch another year disappear anyway. The knowledge does not slow anything down. It just gives you something precise to say while the years continue leaving. The proportional theory of time perception is usually credited to the 19th century philosopher Paul Janet, though the intuition is considerably older. The basic claim is straightforward. Subjective duration is relative to the total duration of a life already experienced. A year at age 10 occupies 1/10 of everything you have lived. A year at 40 occupies 1/40. The denominator grows and the experienced weight of each unit shrinks accordingly. It is an elegant framing. And neuroscience offers a parallel account that points in the same direction. When the brain encounters something new, a first day, in an unfamiliar city, a new job, a relationship in its early weeks, it encodes that experience in detail. Novel inputs require active processing. They produce dense, textured memories. When you look back on a period rich in novelty, it feels long, because there is simply more of it stored. Routine works in the opposite direction. When Monday looks like the Monday before it, the brain conserves effort. Less encoding happens. The week does not register with any particular weight. Look back from December, and find that you cannot locate most of March. It passed. You were there. You have very little to show for it in memory. Adulthood, for most people, involves more routine than childhood. The same commute, the same colleagues, the same tasks recurring on the same cycle. Children, by contrast, are encountering almost everything for the first time. First snow. First bicycle. First understanding that other people have inner lives as complex as their own. So, less novelty produces thinner memory, produces the retrospective sense that time has compressed. The explanation assembles cleanly. It makes sense of the data. And yet, here is the problem. The explanation describes a ratio. It does not describe the feeling of watching something that cannot be recovered. People who understand the proportional theory completely, who can state it accurately, who find it intellectually satisfying, report that it changes nothing about their experience of time passing. The next year still disappears. The mechanism has been named. The mechanism continues operating. There is no lever the explanation gives you access to. This is unusual. Most explanations, once understood, alter the experience they describe. If you understand why a magic trick works, the trick loses its power. If you understand why a piece of music produces a particular emotion, you hear it differently. Explanation in most domains is also a kind of intervention. Time acceleration does not behave this way. The knowledge sits next to the experience without touching it, which raises a question that the proportional account does not address. What exactly is being perceived? Because memory compression explains why the past feels short when you look back. But people also report, and this is a somewhat different claim, a perspective sense that time is moving quickly, even as it happens. A felt velocity. Not just a retrospective illusion, but something more like an ongoing awareness of acceleration. This perspective sense is harder to account for. It can seem like the present itself is thinner, less substantial, as though the moments are arriving and departing before they have fully registered. Not that you remember less of the year, but that there was, somehow, less year to remember. No one has entirely satisfactorily explained why the feeling persists, even when the explanation is known. That gap is worth sitting with. There is a separate thread of inquiry that approaches the same phenomenon from the inside rather than the outside. It concerns not memory encoding, but the body's internal clock, the physiological rhythms that give rise to duration. Body temperature, metabolic rate, and heart rate all tend to decline gradually over the course of a life. Some researchers have proposed that these changes affect the subjective tempo of experience, that a faster internal metabolism produces a faster subjective clock. Children's hearts beat faster. Children's internal chemistry runs hotter, which might mean that their subjective seconds are literally longer than ours. More physiological events occur in the interval we both call a moment. This is speculative. The precise relationship between metabolic rate and time perception is not established. But the idea carries a particular unease when you follow it. It would mean that the acceleration of experienced time is not purely a memory artifact. It would mean the present moment itself is different. That a child's now is more spacious than an adult's now, not because the child is paying better attention, but because the clock they are running on ticks at a different rate. If that is even partially true, then what is being lost is not just memorable experience. What is being lost is duration itself, the actual width of the present, narrowing as the years accumulate. This cannot be confirmed. But people describe something that rhymes with it, the uncanny sense that moments used to last longer. Not that they remember more of them, that the moments themselves were bigger, weeder, had more room inside them. The proportional explanation does not touch this. The proportional explanation is about looking back. This feeling is about right now. What makes the acceleration of time unusual as experiences go is that it seems to resist the categories we normally use to sort out disturbing things. It is not a loss you can mourn in any conventional sense. Nothing has been taken. The time was yours. You occupied it. You were fully present, or as fully present as anyone is. But the accumulation of those present moments seems to have produced something that cannot quite be called a life of the expected length. December arrives. You look back across the year and find it has the texture of a month. Some people describe this as a kind of background alarm, not panic, but a persistent low signal of wrongness. The sense that there is a process underway that cannot be examined directly, only noticed in its effects. The year that vanished. The photograph of yourself from a decade ago that requires a moment of genuine effort to connect to present experience. What is strange is that the wrongness does not resolve upon reflection. You reflect. You understand the mechanisms. You accept that this is how human beings process time. The alarm continues at the same frequency. This is close to what the philosopher would call an irreducible experience, something that cannot be fully captured in a third-person account. The fact of it can be described. The feeling of it stays on your side of the description. And there is one further wrinkle, which most accounts of time acceleration pass over quickly. The acceleration is not just felt in the abstract. It is felt specifically as loss. Not all compressing experiences feel like loss, but this one does. Universally. Across every person who reports it. That specificity is interesting. It suggests the feeling is carrying information. What it might be pointing at is harder to say. Return to the proportional explanation one more time. Each year is a smaller fraction of the total. This is mathematically sound. But notice what the explanation implicitly assumes. That the self doing the experiencing remains constant across those years. That there is a continuous you who is experiencing year 2 as larger than year 40. Because year 2 was 50% of everything and year 40 was only 2.5%. But the self at 2 and the self at 40 are not the same self in any obvious sense. The memories, the reference points, the people who matter, the face in the mirror, all substantially different. What is doing the comparing? What persists across the decades to notice that the years have gotten smaller? There is a version of the question that has no clean answer. People report a sense of continuous identity across a life that looks, from the outside, like a long sequence of substantially different people. The 40-year-old has access to some memories of being 7, and a general sense of continuity. But the actual experience of being 7 is not recoverable. It is described, rather than felt. So part of what time acceleration may be pointing at is not just the shrinking of years. It may be pointing at the progressive inaccessibility of your own past. Not just that the years went quickly, but that the self who lived them is, in some meaningful sense, no longer present to have lived them. You remember a child who was you. The child is not available for comment. The math can describe the ratio. It cannot describe what it is to look back across a life and find that most of it is now, in some fundamental way, a foreign country, visited once, not revisitable. This is the part the explanation leaves untouched. There is a road in the explanation. The road is well built. It has clear markings and it goes exactly where it says it goes. At the end of the road, the mechanism is labeled. Novel experience, memory encoding, proportional diminishment, metabolic tempo, .I. All of it present and accounted for. And then you step off the end of the road and find that the feeling is still there, unchanged, waiting, as it always was, just past the last thing that could be said about it. Maybe this is what the feeling is actually communicating. Not a malfunction, not an error in processing, but an accurate perception of something that explanation can approach and never quite reach. The fact that a life is finite, felt from the inside, in real time, without the possibility of standing outside it to get a better look. Every explanation of time acceleration treats it as a problem of perception. A gap between the clock and the felt experience. A calibration issue to be accounted for. But there is another possibility. That the perception is accurate. That time does, in some experiential sense, move faster as a life progresses. That the years are genuinely narrower than they were. And that the reason no explanation fully dissolves the dread is not that the explanation is incomplete. It is that the dread is the appropriate response. December arrives. You know exactly why the year passed quickly. The knowledge, precise and correct, sits beside the experience without altering it. Somewhere behind you, a door closes. You cannot quite identify when it closed. Only that the room on the other side is no longer accessible. And the year before this one is already somehow a long time ago.